Ethan, what are you doing? Ethan, please come back!
"You're not leaving." The command echoed through the cathedral just as I loosened the silk tie that had been strangling my neck for the last hour. Hundreds of guests turned in unison. Cameras lifted. Phones came out. My mother stepped forward first, her perfectly practiced smile finally cracking. "Ethan," she hissed through clenched teeth, "think about our family before you embarrass us." I looked past her. Sophia, the woman waiting at the altar in a custom white gown, didn't look heartbroken. She looked annoyed, as if I had delayed a meeting. The realization hurt more than it should have. "You knew?" I said quietly. She met my eyes without flinching. "I knew what? That your father already signed the merger agreement before today." Silence. Not confusion. Not denial. Silence. The guests began whispering. Someone from the media recognized the tension and edged closer. My future father-in-law straightened his expensive suit. "This isn't the place." "No," I replied. "That's exactly why you chose it." He frowned. "You wanted the wedding first because once our companies merged, walking away would destroy my family's reputation." My mother grabbed my wrist. "Enough." I gently removed her hand. "No, not anymore." 3 hours earlier, I still believed I was marrying the woman I'd spent 4 years loving. Then an anonymous envelope arrived in my hotel room. Inside were copies of contracts, emails, bank transfers. Every page carried one message. This marriage was never about me. I had been the final signature in a corporate acquisition disguised as a wedding. Sophia hadn't fallen in love with Ethan Carter. She had selected Carter Holdings. I looked toward her again. "If that envelope was fake," I asked, "why aren't you denying any of it?" She finally sighed. "You're emotional." The words landed like a knife. Not guilty. Not sorry. Just inconvenient. "I was going to tell you after the honeymoon." Several guests gasped. So it was true. It wasn't manipulation. She crossed her arms. It was business. Business. For years reduced to a negotiation. My father, already weakened by months of illness, struggled to stand from the front row. "Son." His voice trembled. I immediately walked toward him. Behind me, Sophia called out, "If you leave now, every shareholder will panic." I stopped. Not because of her. Because of what she'd accidentally revealed. Not fiancé. Not partner. Shareholder. She had already chosen the language of ownership. I smiled for the first time all day. A tired smile. "You're right." Hope flashed across several faces. Then I removed the wedding ring from my pocket before it ever reached my finger. "You're absolutely right." The gold circle landed softly on the marble floor. "So let's not waste anyone else's time." I turned toward every guest. "This wedding is over." The cathedral exploded. Questions. Shouting. Flashing cameras. Someone yelled my name. Another demanded an explanation. Security rushed forward. My mother looked ready to collapse. Sophia finally lost her composure. "You're destroying everything." "No." I looked at her one last time. I just stopped protecting it. Without another word, I walked through the massive wooden doors. Rain greeted me immediately. Cold, heavy, real, unlike everything waiting inside. The city blurred beyond the windshield as I drove with no destination. Calls flooded my phone. Mother, board members, friends, journalists, Sophia. I rejected everyone. The wedding suit still clung to my shoulders like a costume from someone else's life. At a red light, another message appeared. Unknown number. "Don't go home tonight. They're preparing emergency board documents without you." I stared at it. Whoever had exposed the wedding had not finished. The light turned green. A truck sped through the intersection. Its brakes screamed. Instinct jerked the steering wheel. Metal exploded. Glass shattered. The world flipped sideways. Pain. The smell of gasoline. Rain pouring through broken windows. Everything sounded underwater. Someone was shouting outside. "There's fuel leaking. Call an ambulance." The driver's trapped. My left leg refused to move. Blood slid into my eye. The seatbelt had jammed. Wonderful. I escaped one trap only to die inside another. Voices faded. People hesitated. Nobody wanted to approach a vehicle ready to ignite. Then another sound. An engine stopping abruptly. A car door slamming. Footsteps running through rain. Move! A man's voice. Firm. Fearless. Someone smashed the rear window. Glass rained over me. Can you hear me? Barely. Answer me. Yes. Strong hands cut the seatbelt. The stranger ignored the smoke filling the cabin. You're heavier than you look, he muttered. Despite everything, I almost laughed. He pulled with impossible determination. Pain shot through my shoulder. Another explosion echoed somewhere beneath the engine. We have to go. I know. He dragged me through broken glass seconds before flames burst beneath the hood. Heat rushed over us. The crowd screamed. Both of us collapsed onto the soaked pavement. I rolled onto my back, coughing violently. Rain struck my face. The stranger remained beside me, breathing hard. He looked about 40. Sharp features. Simple black coat. No bodyguards. No hesitation. He had risked everything for someone he didn't know. Sirens approached in the distance. He looked at me carefully. You'll live. You sound disappointed. He laughed once. A sense of humor after nearly dying. His phone rang. The expression on his face changed immediately. Business. Urgent. He answered. Yes. A pause. No. Cancel every meeting. Another pause. I don't care what the board wants. Bored. Interesting. He hung up. Then several luxury SUVs surrounded the accident scene. Men in dark suits rushed toward him. Chairman Hale. Chairman? One bodyguard nearly panicked. Sir, thank God you're safe. Safe? I frowned. Had he been driving himself? The bodyguard looked toward me. Who is he? The stranger answered before anyone else could. The man I couldn't leave behind. The ambulance doors slammed shut behind us. A paramedic tightened a bandage around my forehead while another checked my pulse. Across the narrow compartment, the man they had called Chairman Hale sat with blood staining the sleeve of his black coat. None of it seemed to belong to him. He carried himself with the calm of someone used to giving orders rather than receiving treatment. You should be in another ambulance, I said. They insisted. He tilted his head toward the tinted windows. My security team. As if on cue, 3 black SUVs followed close behind. I let out a slow breath. You're important. I've been called worse. Despite the pain in my ribs, I smiled. My name's Ethan. I know. That caught my attention. You do. The television in my car was broadcasting your wedding before my driver lost signal. Of course. The entire city had probably watched me destroy my own future. I suppose congratulations are no longer appropriate. I don't think they ever were. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The ambulance rocked over uneven pavement. Finally, he extended his hand. Adrian Hale. The name landed with unexpected weight. Even someone who avoided business gossip knew it. Chairman of Hale Global. One of the wealthiest men in the country. A billionaire whose companies seemed to appear in every major industry. I stared. You're Adrian Hale. I was the last time I checked. You pull me out yourself? I don't delegate everything. His answer was so matter-of-fact that I couldn't tell whether he was joking. The ambulance slowed. Hospital lights came into view. Before the doors opened, Adrian looked directly at me. You walked away. I frowned. From the wedding? Yes. Most people wouldn't. I wasn't most people today. No. He nodded once. You weren't. The emergency room buzzed with organized chaos. Doctors surrounded Adrian almost immediately, but he waved half of them toward me. His shoulder first. Chairman, that's not a suggestion. No one argued. Hours passed in examinations, scans, and paperwork. Nothing life-threatening. Dislocated shoulder. Bruised ribs. Deep cuts. Luck, according to the doctor. I called it expensive luck. Near midnight, a nurse entered my room carrying a sealed envelope. A gentleman asked me to give you this. Inside was a business card. No logo. Only a name. Adrian Hale. On the back, a handwritten sentence. If you decide not to return to the life you walked away from, call me. Nothing else. No promises. No explanation. Morning arrived with another flood of headlines. Groom abandons wedding. Carter heir destroys billion-dollar merger. Markets expect family feud. I switched off the television. A knock followed. My younger sister, Lily, entered carrying coffee and enough frustration for both of us. "You've become famous." I was hoping for anonymous. She hugged me carefully to avoid the bandages. I watched everything. I figured. She sat beside the bed. "They're blaming you." "Expected. Mom says you embarrassed the family." I looked out the window. "And Dad?" Lily hesitated. "He hasn't said a bad word about you." Relief settled somewhere deep inside me. He only asked one question. "What?" "Whether you're finally free." I closed my eyes. For the first time since yesterday, emotion threatened to overwhelm me. My father had understood. Maybe before I had. Lily reached into her bag. "You should probably see this." She handed me a tablet. The screen displayed leaked board documents. Emergency votes. Asset transfers. Authority changes. Every signature line had been prepared before the wedding, including one replacing me as executive vice president. Effective immediately after the ceremony. Cold spread through my chest. They hadn't merely wanted the marriage. They had planned my removal. The anonymous envelope had only exposed part of the truth. Someone inside those companies had saved me from signing away both my future and my voice. Another knock interrupted us. This time, the visitor wore a charcoal suit. Perfect posture. Expression unreadable. "Mr. Carter?" "Yes." He presented a small leather folder. "Chairman Hale requests your presence once you're discharged." "I haven't accepted anything." "He didn't ask me to persuade you." The man offered the folder. "He asked me to deliver information." Inside lay a single document. Not a contract. Not an offer. A list. 12 companies. Every one connected to Sophia's father. Every one carrying enormous hidden debt. I looked up sharply. "What is this?" "The truth." The man replied evenly. "Chairman Hale believes you deserve to know exactly what you almost married into." My heartbeat quickened. If these records were genuine, the wedding had never been the end of the trap. It had only been the beginning. The suited man turned toward the door. "One more thing, Mr. Carter." "Yes." "Chairman Hale said to remind you of something." "What?" He repeated Adrian's exact words. "You stopped protecting it." The room fell silent again. For the first time in years, I realized walking away had not left me with nothing. It had given me a choice. And somewhere beyond the hospital walls, the man who had dragged me from a burning car seemed to believe that choice could change everything. The first thing I did after leaving the hospital wasn't going home. It was turning my phone off. Not silent. Not airplane mode. Off. For 6 years, every vibration had meant another demand. Attend this meeting. Smooth over that conflict. Apologize to that investor. Compromise. Protect the company. Protect the family. Protect the image. The silence inside the car felt almost unfamiliar. Adrian Hale's driver waited without speaking. He didn't ask where I wanted to go. He already knew. 30 minutes later, the car stopped before Hale Global's headquarters. A tower of steel and glass pierced the gray afternoon sky. Employees flowed through the revolving doors in tailored suits, each moving with purpose. No banners. No photographers. No unnecessary luxury. Just quiet efficiency. The lobby manager straightened the moment she recognized the driver. "Mr. Carter." I blinked. "You know me?" "Chairman Hale informed us you might arrive." Might. Not would. He hadn't assumed I'd accept. That detail stayed with me. The private elevator opened directly into the top floor. Adrian stood alone beside a wall of windows overlooking the city. No assistants. No lawyers. No security. He poured tea into 2 cups without looking back. "You came. You expected I wouldn't?" "I expected you to make your own decision." I accepted the cup. Neither of us spoke for nearly a minute. Finally, he asked, "How's your shoulder?" "Still attached." "Good. You?" "I've survived worse board meetings." A faint smile crossed my face. "So have I." His expression sharpened. "Not anymore." He placed a thick folder on the table. "Read." Inside were investigative reports, financial statements, email chains, Offshore accounts. Every page uncovered another layer beneath my canceled wedding. Sophia's father's conglomerate wasn't expanding. It was collapsing. Massive loans had been hidden through shell companies. Pending lawsuits had been buried inside subsidiaries. Within 18 months, bankruptcy seemed almost inevitable. I looked up. They wanted Carter Holdings to absorb the debt. Exactly. And my signature would have legitimized everything. Adrian nodded. You weren't marrying into another family. You were becoming their shield. The room suddenly felt colder. They never loved me. No. They needed me. Yes. I closed the file. I keep wondering something. What? Who sent me the envelope? Adrian looked toward the city. I did. Silence. You. I've spent months investigating their finances. Why? They approached Hale Global first. I frowned. They wanted your company? They wanted anyone wealthy enough to rescue theirs. And you refused. I don't purchase sinking ships. I leaned back slowly. So they came after Carter Holdings. They assumed your family's emotions would succeed where business negotiations failed. I let out a bitter laugh. They weren't wrong. If that wedding had happened, Adrian said quietly, you would have spent years paying for another man's deception. The truth settled heavily inside me. Walking away hadn't destroyed my future. It had prevented it from being stolen. You haven't asked why I risked my life yesterday. I looked toward Adrian. I assumed you don't leave people behind. He remained silent. Then, my younger brother died 15 years ago. His voice carried no self-pity, only fact. There was a highway accident. I waited. Dozens of people watched. His fingers tightened around the teacup. Nobody climbed into the burning vehicle. Understanding hit me instantly. I was 16. I couldn't pull him out. The office became impossibly quiet. When I saw your car, he looked directly at me. I wasn't watching another person burn. No dramatic pause followed. No request for sympathy. Just honesty. I finally understood why someone worth billions had ignored every instinct of self-preservation. Not because he was fearless, because he had lived with regret. I'm sorry. So am I. Neither of us spoke again until another knock interrupted. Adrian's assistant entered. Chairman, what is it? The media has gathered downstairs. For me. For both of you. She hesitated, and Carter Holdings has issued an official statement. She handed me a printed copy. I read only the headline. Ethan Carter has voluntarily resigned from all executive responsibilities. I froze. I never signed this. Adrian extended his hand. I passed him the paper. They forged it. They're trying to. He tapped the signature. Look carefully. Something looked strange. The slant. The spacing. Even I could tell it wasn't mine. They're testing public reaction. If nobody challenges it, Adrian continued, the forgery becomes tomorrow's truth. Anger rose inside me. Not explosive. Cold. Controlled. They've started without me. Adrian met my eyes. So, what will you do? For the first time since the wedding, the answer came naturally. Nothing. His eyebrow lifted. They expect me to rush home. They expect me to defend myself. They expect me to beg for my position. I folded the statement once. They can keep expecting. 2 days later, Carter Holdings held an emergency shareholders conference. I didn't attend. The decision shocked nearly everyone. Television analysts called it surrender. Business commentators declared my career finished. Friends sent messages asking if I'd lost hope. I answered none of them. Instead, I sat inside Hale Global Strategy Room, watching the live broadcast on a silent television. They're nervous, Adrian observed. They don't look nervous. Look closer. I did. Sophia's father smiled too often. My mother kept adjusting her necklace. The company's legal advisor avoided eye contact with everyone. Fear hid beneath confidence. You really think they'll destroy themselves? I think desperate people make expensive mistakes. As if proving his point, the chairman announced an accelerated acquisition proposal. Earlier than expected. Rushed. Almost reckless. I frowned. They're forcing the merger anyway. They have to. If they wait, the debt becomes public. Exactly. For the first time, I wasn't standing inside the fire. I was watching the smoke rise from outside. That evening, Lily visited Adrian's headquarters. She stared around the executive lounge. I've never seen so much glass. Does it make you nervous? I asked. It makes me afraid to touch anything. Adrian unexpectedly entered carrying coffee. You must be Lily. She nearly dropped her cup. Why, you know me? Ethan talks about you. I blinked. I do. When you're unconscious, apparently. Lily burst into laughter. I covered my face. I really said that? The pain medication was honest. For the first time in weeks, genuine laughter filled the room. Small, simple, real. After Adrian left to answer another call, Lily leaned closer. I like him. As a businessman, as someone who doesn't want anything from you. The words lingered. She wasn't wrong. Adrian hadn't offered me a position, hadn't pressured me into joining Hale Global, hadn't asked for loyalty. He had simply given me room to breathe. I hadn't realized how valuable that was. 3 days later, another anonymous package arrived. This time, there was no return address. Inside lay a flash drive. One handwritten sentence accompanied it. They'll deny everything until they hear themselves. I plugged it into my laptop. Several audio files appeared. Meeting recordings. Hidden conversations. Sophia's voice filled the speakers. He'll never suspect anything. Another voice. Her father. He loves you too much. Soft laughter. Then, once the wedding is over, Carter Holdings assumes every guarantee. What if Ethan refuses? He won't. Why? A pause. Good men confuse sacrifice with love. The recording ended. I couldn't move. Not because I was heartbroken, because he'd understood me so perfectly. He had predicted every decision I'd been prepared to make. Every compromise. Every apology. Every surrender. Adrian entered quietly. You listened. I nodded. Do you know who recorded it? He hesitated. No. Can you find them? I've been trying. Someone hidden inside their organization continued risking everything to expose the truth. Someone I'd never met. Someone whose motives remained a mystery. Before either of us could speak again, Adrian's assistant rushed inside. Chairman. What happened? Carter Holdings has filed a lawsuit. Against whom? The assistant looked directly at me. They're accusing Mr. Carter of corporate sabotage. Silence settled over the room. Then Adrian calmly closed the laptop. They've made their move. I looked at the legal notice lying on the table. My own family. My former fiancé. The company I'd protected for years. They had officially declared me their enemy. Outside the office windows, storm clouds rolled across the city. For the first time, I didn't feel the urge to run toward the disaster. I simply watched it coming. The lawsuit arrived at my apartment before sunrise. A courier in a gray uniform waited patiently until I signed for the thick envelope. Good luck, sir, he said quietly. The words sounded sincere. I closed the door and stared at the documents spread across my dining table. Corporate sabotage, breach of fiduciary duty, intentional market manipulation. Each accusation carried enough weight to destroy not only my career, but my reputation for the rest of my life. I laughed, not because it was funny, because every allegation depended on one impossible assumption, that I had leaked confidential company information. The truth? I had never possessed the financial records exposing Sophia's father's hidden debts. Those documents had come from someone else, someone still hidden in the shadows. A knock interrupted my thoughts. Adrian entered without ceremony, carrying 2 cups of coffee. I assumed you hadn't slept. I tried. And the lawsuit won. He placed 1 cup in front of me before reading the first page. They're aggressive. They're desperate. Exactly. He looked up. They expected you to panic. I almost did, but you didn't call the media. No. You didn't issue a statement. No. You didn't attack them online. I shook my head. They're preparing for a battle. I folded the lawsuit closed. I'm not giving them one. Adrian's eyes reflected quiet approval. Good. 2 days later, the first court hearing was scheduled. The courthouse steps swarmed with journalists. Microphones stretched toward me from every direction. Mr. Carter, did you betray your family's company? Did you leak confidential information? Are you working for Hale Global? Did Chairman Hale pay you? Flashes erupted like lightning. I stopped walking. The reporters fell silent. I could feel Adrian's security team tensing behind me. I spoke only one sentence. The truth doesn't become weaker because it arrives later. Then I continued inside. No explanations. No accusations. No emotional speech. The headlines that evening called me arrogant. Adrian merely smiled. They're disappointed. Why? You refuse to entertain them. Inside the courtroom, my mother's eyes never left me. She looked older than I remembered. Tired. Sophia sat beside her father, immaculate as always. Our eyes met for only a second. She looked away first. The judge entered. Proceedings began. The opposing attorney stood confidently. Your Honor, the defendant intentionally sabotaged a strategic merger by illegally obtaining confidential financial records. I remained silent. My lawyer glanced toward me. Mr. Carter? I nodded once. He rose calmly. The plaintiff claims my client possessed confidential records. Correct. We request proof. The opposing attorney smiled. They were distributed anonymously. Then who distributed them? We're investigating. So you don't know? No. You can't identify the source. No. You can't prove my client obtained them illegally. Silence. The attorney shifted slightly. We believe. My client isn't on trial because of your beliefs. The judge adjusted his glasses. I agree. A small crack had appeared in their case. Nothing more. Nothing less. During recess, my mother approached. Ethan. I turned. She reached toward my arm before stopping halfway. I never wanted this. Didn't you? Tears gathered in her eyes. They told me if the merger failed, your father's legacy would disappear. My father's legacy isn't a balance sheet. She looked down. I know that now. Do you? She couldn't answer. Someone called her name. She returned to the other side of the hallway without another word. I watched her leave. For years, I believed my mother had chosen ambition over family. Now, I wasn't so certain. Perhaps she'd simply been manipulated by people who understood her fears. That realization didn't erase the damage, but it softened the anger. That night, Lily burst into my apartment carrying a laptop. You need to see this. She placed it on the table. A financial blogger had published an anonymous article. No names, no accusations. Only one question. Why did Carter Holdings rush the wedding? The article included timelines, loan maturity dates, corporate filings, publicly available records. Nothing confidential, nothing illegal. Yet when combined, the pattern became impossible to ignore. Adrian read the article twice. Our mystery ally. You think so? They've changed tactics. No leaked documents. No stolen information. Only public facts. I leaned back. They're forcing people to ask questions. And once people begin asking, they'll start finding answers. A slow smile crossed Adrian's face. They're smarter than I thought. 3 days later, the market reacted. Not violently, quietly. One institutional investor postponed funding. Another requested an independent audit. A third delayed signing a credit extension. No accusations. Only caution. For a company already drowning in hidden debt, caution was deadly. I watched the financial news from Adrian's office. The dominoes are moving, he said. I didn't push them. You didn't need to. His phone buzzed. After reading one message, his expression changed. What happened? Our investigator found someone. The anonymous source? Possibly. He looked uncertain. But something doesn't fit. An hour later, we drove to a small cafe on the edge of the city. Rain tapped softly against the windows. A woman in her late 60s sat alone near the back. Simple clothes, silver hair, weathered hands. She stood the moment she saw Adrian. You came. You asked for secrecy. I always do. She looked toward me. So you're Ethan. You know me? I knew your father. My heartbeat skipped. She introduced herself. Margaret Wells. The name meant nothing to me, until she placed an old photograph on the table. My father, much younger, standing beside Adrian's father. And beside them, Margaret. We built Carter Holdings together, she said quietly. You were a founder? She smiled faintly. Unofficially. I stared. My father never mentioned you. He wasn't allowed to. Allowed. She sighed. Some stories become inconvenient. Adrian remained unusually quiet. Margaret continued. When your father became ill, he asked someone to watch over you. I frowned. Who? She looked directly at Adrian. He did. The room fell silent. I turned toward him. You knew my father? We met years ago. You never said anything. You never asked. I shook my head slowly. So saving me wasn't an accident. It wasn't. You were already protecting me. I was honoring a promise. Emotion tightened my throat. My father had seen the danger long before I had. He had prepared for it, not by controlling my future, but by placing someone trustworthy nearby. Margaret reached into her handbag. I didn't ask you here only for memories. She placed a sealed envelope on the table. This belonged to your father. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside rested a handwritten letter, not addressed to the company, not to shareholders, to me. If you're reading this, it means you've finally chosen yourself. My vision blurred. I spent too many years believing responsibility meant sacrificing happiness. I prayed you would become wiser than I was. If walking away costs you everything, remember this. Anything built upon deception deserves to fall. Don't waste your life holding broken walls together. No business advice. No instructions. Only a father's final hope. I folded the letter carefully. I thought I disappointed him. Margaret smiled through moist eyes. No. He was proud the moment you left that altar. Before I could respond, Adrian's phone rang sharply. He answered. Listened. His expression hardened. What is it? I asked. He lowered the phone. The independent auditors entered Carter Holdings this morning. Already? Yes. And they've frozen every major financial transfer. Margaret quietly closed her teacup. They found something. Adrian nodded once. They found enough. Outside, the rain began falling harder. For the first time since I walked away from the wedding, I realized the collapse had already started. Not because I exposed anyone. Not because I fought back. But because the truth, once seen, refused to hide again. The news broke at 8:17 the next morning. Every major business channel interrupted its scheduled programming. Breaking news. Carter Holdings under formal financial investigation. I stood silently in Adrian's office while reporters crowded outside the company's headquarters. No one smiled anymore. No one spoke about the canceled wedding. The headlines had changed. Suspected accounting fraud. Emergency regulatory audit begins. Billions in undisclosed liabilities questioned. Adrian muted the television. They've crossed the point of no return. I stared through the glass wall, overlooking the city. They'll still deny it. For a while. His assistant entered without knocking. Chairman, what happened? The regulators have requested access to archived board recordings. Adrian's expression remained calm. They're finally asking the right questions. 3 days later, I received an unexpected summons. Not from the court, from the regulators. The conference room inside the Financial Oversight Bureau felt cold despite the afternoon heat. 3 investigators sat across from me. One elderly woman opened the meeting. Mr. Carter, thank you for coming voluntarily. I have nothing to hide. We know. She slid several documents toward me. We'd like you to identify these signatures. I recognized them immediately. Mine. Or rather, copies of mine. The same forged handwriting from the resignation announcement. Only this time there were 12 documents. Loan guarantees. Internal approvals. Risk acknowledgments. Every page supposedly carried my authorization. I shook my head. These aren't mine. Can you explain why they resemble your signature? Someone practiced. The investigators exchanged glances. One younger man spoke. Our forensic department reached the same conclusion. Relief washed over me. The truth finally had professionals examining it. The elderly investigator leaned forward. Mr. Carter. Yes. Who benefited from these forged approvals? I answered without hesitation. The people who needed my name more than my consent. She nodded slowly. That's what we believed. For the first time since the wedding, I wasn't being questioned as a suspect. I was being treated as a witness. Outside the building, Sophia waited. Alone. No luxury car. No assistance. No cameras. She looked exhausted. Dark circles shadowed her eyes. Ethan. I stopped several feet away. What do you want? 5 minutes. You had 4 years. She lowered her gaze. I deserve that. No. A long silence stretched between us. Finally, she whispered, I loved you. The words barely stirred anything inside me. You loved what I could save. That's not true. Then tell me. I met her eyes steadily. On the morning of our wedding, when your father handed you those merger papers. Her breathing faltered. Why didn't you walk away with me? She couldn't answer. Not because she lacked words. Because the answer already existed. She had chosen. Not me. Her father's company. After nearly a minute, tears rolled silently down her face. I was afraid. So was I. The difference settled painfully between us. I left anyway. She covered her mouth as another sob escaped. I can't change what happened. No. I turned to leave. But you can stop lying. Those were the last words I spoke to her. That evening, the regulators raided 4 companies connected to her father. Hidden servers, private accounting offices, storage warehouses. Everything was seized. By midnight, another headline spread across the country. Massive evidence recovered in expanding fraud investigation. No names yet, but everyone understood where the investigation was heading. The board meeting that followed wasn't private. For the first time in Carter Holdings history, major shareholders demanded full transparency. Every director attended. Independent observers filled the back rows. Regulators watched remotely. I entered only because I'd been formally invited as a witness. Not as an executive. Not as an heir. Simply, Ethan Carter. The chairman's seat looked strangely empty. Sophia's father sat several chairs away, his confidence noticeably thinner than before. My mother avoided looking at anyone. The acting chairman cleared his throat. We're here to address recent allegations. A regulator interrupted immediately. They're no longer allegations. The room froze. An investigator connected a laptop to the projector. Rows of financial records appeared. Hidden subsidiaries. Circular transactions. Shell corporations. Each chart connected to another until the web filled the entire screen. Gasps echoed around the room. Then came the emails. Then the offshore transfers. Then the forged approvals. Finally, the audio recording. Sophia's father's voice filled the conference room. Good men confuse sacrifice with love. Silence. Absolute silence. No lawyer objected. No executive defended him. Because they couldn't. The recording continued. Every calculated discussion. Every deliberate deception. Every plan to bury Carter Holdings beneath someone else's debt. When the audio stopped, the room remained motionless. The lead regulator stood. Our forensic examination confirms extensive financial fraud, document forgery, and intentional concealment of liabilities. He turned towards Sophia's father. You are under formal investigation. 2 officers stepped forward. For the first time since I'd met him, the powerful businessman looked small. This is political, he shouted. No. The regulator's voice remained even. It's accounting. His wrists were secured. Shareholders stared in disbelief as he was escorted toward the exit. Halfway to the door, he twisted around to look at me. This isn't over. I met his furious gaze. It already is. He disappeared beyond the doors. The silence he left behind felt heavier than any victory. The acting chairman slowly turned toward my mother. Mrs. Carter. She looked up with trembling hands. We've completed our own internal review. He placed another folder before her. The evidence confirms Ethan never approved the disputed transactions. Tears streamed down her face. I know. No. He gently shook his head. Now everyone knows. She looked across the room at me. I failed you. I didn't answer immediately. Years of disappointment couldn't disappear because of one sentence. But neither could I ignore the sincerity in her voice. You believe fear. She nodded. I did. I hope one day you stop. She quietly wept into her hands. That was enough. No shouting. No revenge. No humiliation. The consequences had arrived on their own. As the meeting ended, several shareholders approached me. Mr. Carter, we'd like you to return. You belong here. I thanked each of them politely, then declined. Outside the headquarters, reporters waited behind barriers. Questions flew the moment I appeared. Will you reclaim your position? Are you taking control of Carter Holdings? Do you have a statement? I paused only once. I didn't walk away to come back unchanged. Then I continued down the steps. Adrian waited beside a black sedan across the street. He didn't ask how the meeting had gone. He already knew. As I opened the passenger door, I looked back one final time. The company I'd once believed was my entire future stood behind me. For years, I'd mistaken obligation for purpose. Now, for the first time in my life, I was walking forward instead of away. The morning after the board meeting, I woke before sunrise. Not because of anxiety, because for the first time in years, there wasn't a single emergency waiting on my phone. No investor demanding answers. No family argument requiring a compromise. No calendar packed with meetings I secretly hated. Only silence. It felt unfamiliar, almost unsettling. I made coffee, opened the balcony door, and watched the city wake beneath a pale orange sky. My phone buzzed. One message. Adrian. Breakfast? I smiled before typing back. Only if you're buying. An hour later, we sat in a small cafe several blocks away from Hale Global. No bodyguards hovered nearby. No executives interrupted us. Just 2 cups of coffee and fresh bread. The owner greeted Adrian by name. You still come here? Every Thursday. You've never mentioned it. He shrugged. Not everything important belongs in a boardroom. The old woman behind the counter brought another basket to our table. You've been too thin lately, Adrian. I've been accused of worse. She laughed and lightly smacked his shoulder. Watching the exchange, I realized something. To the business world, Adrian Hale was untouchable. Here, he was simply another regular customer. You've built quite a reputation, I said. He looked around the cafe. I hope not. I meant, I know. He stirred his coffee. The companies matter. He paused. The people matter more. I understood why my father had trusted him. After breakfast, Adrian handed me a small folder. I have a proposal. I raised an eyebrow. I thought you weren't going to recruit me. I'm not. I opened it. Inside wasn't an employment contract. It was the charter for a charitable foundation, the Carter Hale Initiative, dedicated to helping employees whose companies collapsed because of executive fraud. Scholarships, emergency legal assistance, career transition support. I looked up. You've already funded this? My legal team finished the paperwork yesterday. Why use my family's name? Because your father believed businesses should protect people. I stared at the documents. He told you that? More than once. My chest tightened. I don't know if I'm ready. Adrian nodded. Then don't decide today. Again, no pressure. Only space. That afternoon, I visited my father. His health had declined over the past year, and he'd moved into a quiet rehabilitation center outside the city. He sat beside the garden pond, wrapped in a light blanket. When he saw me, he smiled. Not proudly, not sadly, just warmly. You look lighter. I feel lighter. I hoped you would. I pulled a chair beside him. For a while, neither of us spoke. The breeze carried the scent of blooming jasmine through the garden. Finally, I asked, Did you know? About the merger? About everything. He watched the koi fish glide beneath the water. I suspected. And you didn't stop it? I tried. He coughed softly before continuing. But sometimes fathers confuse protecting their children with choosing for them. He looked at me. I decided that if you discovered the truth yourself, I'd actually learn from it. He nodded. You did. I laughed quietly. It hurt. It always does. His weathered hand rested gently over mine. But you're still here. Before leaving, he reached into the drawer beside his chair. I've been saving this. He handed me a worn leather notebook. My journal. My mistakes. I frowned. I wrote down every business decision I regretted. I opened the first page. The handwriting had faded slightly with time. The very first sentence read, Never sacrifice your family for success. One day you'll lose both. I closed the notebook carefully. I'll keep it. I hope you never need it. The foundation officially opened 3 months later. There were no fireworks, no celebrity speeches, No lavish celebration. Only a modest ribbon-cutting ceremony attended by former employees from companies destroyed by corruption. One woman approached me afterward. She couldn't have been older than 35. My husband lost everything when his employer collapsed. She smiled nervously. This program helped him find work again. I didn't know what to say. She bowed her head slightly. Thank you. For years, I believed success meant protecting a corporation. Standing there, I finally understood. Sometimes protecting people mattered far more. Life settled into a rhythm. 3 mornings each week were spent at the foundation. The remaining days were devoted to consulting independently. I accepted only projects that aligned with my values. Several lucrative offers arrived from companies wanting to capitalize on my public image. I declined every one. Money had once dictated every decision around me. I refused to let it dictate mine. One evening, Lily visited my apartment carrying takeout containers. You work too much. I learned from the best. You mean the worst. She set dinner on the table before looking around. You've changed. In what way? You smiled before answering questions now. I laughed. I didn't realize. You also sleep. That's true. She grew quiet. Mom wants to see you. The chopsticks paused in my hand. Is she all right? She's trying. Several seconds passed. I don't know if I'm ready. You don't have to forgive anyone tonight. She smiled gently. But don't close the door forever. A week later, I met my mother in the same cathedral where the wedding had fallen apart. There were no decorations, no guests, only sunlight filtering through stained glass. She stood near the front pew. I wasn't sure you'd come. I wasn't either. She nodded sadly. I've resigned from the board. I heard. I should have done it years ago. Silence settled between us. Then she reached into her handbag and handed me a small velvet box. Inside lay the wedding ring I dropped onto the marble floor. I kept it. I looked at the simple gold band. I don't want it. I know. She closed the box again. I just wanted you to know. Her voice broke. That I finally understand why you left. Tears gathered in her eyes. I thought saving the company meant saving our family. It didn't. No. She looked around the empty cathedral. It only taught me how much I'd already lost. For a long moment, we simply stood there. Some wounds heal quickly. Others become quiet scars. Neither of us pretended everything was fixed. But when we left the cathedral together, we walked side by side. Not because the past had disappeared, because we had finally stopped pretending it never happened. That evening, Adrian called. How did it go? We talked. And, I looked toward the sunset beyond my apartment window. It's the beginning of something. What? Peace. He remained silent for a moment. Then he said quietly, Your father would have liked that. I believed he was right. For the first time since I walked away from the wedding, I no longer measured my life by what I'd escaped. I measured it by what I had finally chosen to build. Winter arrived quietly. The city looked different beneath pale morning light. So did I. Nearly a year had passed since I walked away from the altar. Long enough for headlines to disappear. Long enough for strangers to stop recognizing my face. Long enough for silence to become something I treasured instead of feared. The Carter Hale initiative had expanded into 3 cities. Every month, another group of employees found legal guidance, financial counseling, or simply someone willing to listen after losing everything to corporate misconduct. The work wasn't glamorous. It mattered anyway. One afternoon, as I finished reviewing scholarship applications, my assistant knocked gently. Mr. Carter, come in. Someone is asking to see you. Did they make an appointment? No. Who is it? She hesitated. Mr. Victor Lang. The name immediately brought back memories. Victor Lang had served as chief financial officer at Carter Holdings for almost 15 years. He had resigned quietly just before the regulators completed their investigation. Unlike Sophia's father, he'd never been arrested. He had disappeared before anyone asked difficult questions. What does he want? He wouldn't say. I considered refusing. Then I remembered my father's journal. Face uncomfortable truths before they become permanent regrets. Send him in. Victor entered slowly. He looked older than I remembered. Not physically, emotionally. His shoulders had lost the confidence of a man accustomed to controlling boardrooms. He carried only a thin leather folder. I won't waste your time. I'd appreciate that. He nodded. I owe you an apology. I remained silent. He placed the folder on my desk. I knew. Those two words hung heavily between us. I knew about the hidden debt. I suspected as much. I signed documents I shouldn't have signed. Why? He smiled bitterly. Because I convinced myself I was protecting jobs. I looked at him carefully. I've heard that excuse before. So have I. His honesty surprised me. I kept telling myself we'd fix everything after the merger. He laughed softly. We never intended to. The admission carried no pride, only exhaustion. He pushed the folder toward me. I've been cooperating with investigators. Inside were signed statements, personal notes, meeting minutes, records that filled in the last missing pieces of the fraud. There was one thing the investigators never understood, he said quietly. What? The wedding wasn't your idea. I know. It wasn't Sophia's either. I frowned. It was negotiated. My expression hardened. What do you mean? Victor looked away. Both families believed sacrificing your happiness was acceptable if it saved their businesses. For several moments, I couldn't speak. Not because I was shocked, because hearing the truth aloud made it painfully real. I wasn't a groom. No, you were collateral. Victor lowered his head. I'm sorry. The apology didn't erase anything, but it no longer needed to. You should tell the investigators. I already have. He stood. As he reached the door, he paused. Your father was the only one who argued against it. I looked up sharply. What? He refused to pressure you. Victor smiled sadly. He said, his voice softened. If my son chooses that marriage himself, I'll support him. But I won't sell his future to rescue my past. The room became impossibly quiet. Victor left without another word. I remained seated for a long time, staring at my father's journal. For months, I believed I'd finally understood him. Now I realized there had always been another layer. He hadn't failed to protect me. He had refused to become the kind of father who demanded obedience instead of trust. That evening, I drove alone to the cemetery. Snow rested lightly across the stone paths. I stopped before my grandfather's grave first, then beside it, the place reserved for my father someday. I sat on the nearby bench instead. I think I understand now. The cold air carried my words away. I kept believing strength meant enduring everything. A quiet breeze rustled the bare branches overhead. It doesn't. I smiled faintly. Sometimes strength means leaving. Spring returned with unexpected warmth. The trial concluded without fanfare. Sophia's father accepted a lengthy prison sentence after overwhelming evidence left no realistic defense. Several executives received financial penalties and professional bans. Others quietly disappeared from public life. No dramatic speeches followed. Justice rarely sounded theatrical. It sounded like paperwork, verdicts, and consequences. Sophia testified honestly. For the first time since everything collapsed, she stopped protecting anyone, including herself. Months later, I received a handwritten letter from her. It contained no request to meet, no plea for forgiveness, only one sentence. I finally learned that love without courage becomes another form of betrayal. I folded the letter carefully and placed it inside my father's journal. Some stories didn't require replies. They required acceptance. On the anniversary of the canceled wedding, the Carter Hale Initiative opened its 5th community center. Employees gathered inside the modest auditorium. Families laughed. Children ran between the chairs. A young graduate approached me after the ceremony. I received one of your scholarships. I'm glad. I wanted to become an accountant. He smiled. Now I want to become an ethical one. I laughed. That's even better. Across the room, Adrian watched quietly. You've built something meaningful. We built it. He shook his head. I only opened a door. You walked through it. I looked around the hall. Former factory workers spoke with lawyers. College students met business mentors. Retired executives volunteered beside recent graduates. No one asked who had once been rich or who had once failed, only who needed help today. Perhaps that was what healing truly looked like. Not forgetting the past, building something better because of it. That evening, Adrian and I returned to the small cafe where we'd shared breakfast months earlier. The owner smiled the moment she saw us. The usual? The usual, Adrian answered. As coffee arrived, he looked at me. Do you regret leaving the wedding? I didn't answer immediately. Instead, I remembered everything that had followed. The humiliation, the accident, the burning car, the forged signatures, the courtroom, the investigations, the foundation, my father's words, my mother's tears, the peace that slowly replaced anger. Finally, I smiled. I regret that it ever became necessary. Adrian nodded, but not the decision. No. Outside, evening lights reflected across rain-soaked streets. People hurried home. Traffic moved steadily through the city. Life continued, just as it always had. Only now, I had finally learned that walking away wasn't the end of my story. It was the first honest step toward the life that had been waiting for me all along.